Hello, everybody. This is Stu Smith along with Jeff Nichols. And today we're going to focus on something a little bit different than we normally do. And we want to definitely say thanks to the police and firefighting communities out there. And we're going to do the next three podcasts focused on you guys. So today we're going to talk about getting to and through the Police and Fire Academy. Next time we'll talk about your active duty life and the stresses that entails and how to stay in shape for your job, and then maybe take it to another level and talk about going from police or fire department to any of the special services, SWAT team, public safety diver, rescue teams, things like that require another level of fitness and skill level that you can still prepare for even during your active duty time. So let's start off with this one, Jeff. Getting to a police or fire academy. Usually that entails a fitness test or some kind of screener, the CPAT for firefighters, and
Right.
Normally it's a push-up, sit-up, mile-and-a-half run for the police department. Yeah.
Right. I think, there's so many lines of similarities that we can draw between our experience in the military, but kind of even talking off screen a little bit, Stu and I got to step back and look at it and go, okay, it's the shield and the sword. We kind of come from the sword. They're so similar, but we also have to make sure that not that there's not diversity in our military, but the diversity that's really, really necessary in our police and fire to handle with those much larger spectrum of situations that we had to deal with. And then also on the other side is like when Stu and I would forward deploy to a foreign country, we could kind of just wash our hands of it and come home. And I think that preparing for the basic training, the academy life, I didn't realize how long it was, to be honest with you. For most cases, it's 6 months or longer for most of these men and women. And I think one of the common mistakes that we see that Stu and I have talked about with one of the military and law enforcement and fire is that a lot of guys on both sides, men and women on both sides, they wait to get in shape. They think like boot camp or the academy is going to get me in shape for that job. And I think that the biggest problem with that, I think, is one of the biggest problems is that if you're the man or woman that's just time has to be spent to get you in shape to endure that academy life, you're going to miss out on a lot of training that you would otherwise, I think, is really considered essential. So for me, that's like if someone says, well, why would I put all this work in to get into shape to go to the academy? I was like, because you're going to miss out on a lot of really great training you probably would potentially miss out. Or if so much time is spent on you trying to get in shape, it may actually disqualify you to being in the academy. Like, hey, man, like we're spending way too much time get you in shape. You're missing all this classroom time to learn how to be a firefighter, police officer. We can't do that. So I think that's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the problem with the police and firefighting, and I'm not saying this is a problem specifically, it's not anything they can control, is that there's so many different units out there and departments and cities and states and local communities that all have they have different fitness standards. They have different needs of the type of number of people that they need. I mean, there are some that are so competitive that if you don't pass the fitness test, you're not even going to go to the academy. There are others that if you're barely passing, they may fudge it a little bit and let you in anyway because they need people. So it just kind of depends on where you are going to be living and performing these, community essential tasks, being a policeman or firefighter.
Yeah, I think that's for me. It is so very different regionally, and all the tactical strength conditioning conferences that I've been a part of or hosted. It is really great for me because from Massachusetts to New York, New Jersey, California, even Canada, and all these places I'd get police officers and firefighters. And my ignorance was kind of like, well, they must all be about the same. And they're not. And I never really thought about the difference between, a firefighter at altitude as opposed to somebody like in South Beach, Florida.
Right.
Like it's a big different, it's a much different demand. And, you know, it got me a lot of thinking about like the men and women fighting the fires in Northern California and places, or, you know, even in the Colorado, like what a different animal that is. And
Oh yeah. And compared to like the vertical fires of the city,
for sure.
you know,
And I
main
think
difference.
that, you know, and that's one of the other similarities I look as a coach and go, well, this is exactly why Stu and I keep pounding our heads and saying, hey guys, we can't randomize training. We really got to take a look at the needs of the individual. And in this case, we really want to talk about, for those of you who are trying to prepare, we cannot emphasize enough for you to not overlook what the needs, like the needs of that fire department or that police jurisdiction is. You have to be aware of that because it will affect you. It certainly will affect you.
Well, let's do it this way. Just like we did with the military, we actually had 3 different things for pre-bud stuff. You had to get to the training by crushing the PST. You had to get through the training by beating buds. And then, you know, once you were there, you were at the training, and then we did one on after training. So let's make this one 2 and through. And, you know, from my understanding and research over the years and writing about various fitness tests, I have found that you typically have 2 different types of fitness tests for the police department and even the fire department for that matter. They all have to pass the standard Navy fitness test of push-ups, sit-ups, mile and a half to get to the training. That's about half of the group. And then the other half, they have the FBI version, which is the Cooper's test, which is push-ups, sit-ups, a 300-meter run, and a mile and a half. So they're essentially the same, just they throw a 300-meter sprint in there.
Yep, they put the shot. I think the DEA does the same thing, but that tends to be, I believe, what the model is starting to shift to is a lactating component, the 300.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that Naval Special Warfare is looking at as well, has been as well. So, yeah. So for me, I like, maybe what we'll do is we'll create this stereotypical individual. So we may not hit, you know, someone that's uber fit. We may not talk exactly about someone that's way out of shape, but we're going to try and look at the bell curve, the big bulk, the 75% of the people that are intending on going to police and fire. How should they prepare? I mean, I think that's kind of where we're going to start, right, Stu?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I always say, you know, when you have that 300-meter or even the mile and a half, you know, I got an email the other day and I wrote this big program, an article, you know, this guy that was a great power lifter, liked to lift weights. You know, he wants to be a police officer, but he's never run long distance before. And now he's got to run a mile and a half. And I kind of chuckled because I remember being that guy.
Yeah.
I remember being that guy thinking a mile and a half is long distance. Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Know, it's just one of those things that, you know, you will have to put in the time and get used to running. Don't necessarily have to run 5-6 miles to get used to a mile and a half, obviously, but, you know, you need to learn your pace. You need to push your heart and lungs to be able to maintain that pace. You know, so there are definitely methods of doing that. Jeff has some great programs on running. I have some programs on running. I have this one that's specifically designed for that FBI combo where you got to do a 300-meter sprint and the mile and a half run. And I call it the Need for Speed. It's just an article. I mean, it's not specific as far as to a individual, and it's kind of general, you know, approach to training like this. And you might have to make alterations to fit your needs and where your weaknesses and strengths are. But the key to it is, you know, the way I've always kind of helped people prepare for this test is kind of do everything together, you know. So if we're doing running workouts, do a 300-meter sprint, you do your mile and a half, or maybe a quarter mile or half mile at goal pace, do some repeats, but then rest with those other screening exercises. You got push-ups, you got sit-ups. Pull-ups aren't really graded in most fitness tests. However, they're just a good balance. You know, you need to be able to do pull-ups because once you get to the training, I guarantee you're going to have obstacle courses that you're going to have to pull yourself over a wall, climb a rope, run some stairs, you know, things like that.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and I think that's I think we probably, we might agree, we encounter more of those individuals than we do the uber fast or over or like way under aerobic anaerobic. Like guys are pretty strong fit men and women, and they're having a hard time with, right? It's usually it's the running.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
I would say
running is
that's
what
the
gets a lot
majority.
of people,
Absolutely.
and then the other side is the endurance piece. Not so much like run for a long time endurance. I'm talking about muscular endurance. Like we look at it and go, man, this person's doing 40 push-ups, but they're a pretty fit, strong person by the look of them. They have good absolute strength, but just haven't developed that strength endurance side. And that's where Stu's hitting it right on. I think that one of the best approaches, we need to be well-rounded. And that's the tough thing for even the police and law enforcement and fire to just go. We in a military as well, we tend to train towards our strengths. Yes. And so for someone like me that doesn't like to do long distance running anymore, unless I'm doing trail running or hiking, I had the same thing. I had a former bodybuilder in Texas that's trying to get into buds, and he's 265. And so he's pretty quick from short distance, but the runs are killing him. So we want to do two things. And Stu's kind of already alluded to that. We want to do some interval work, right? That's going to help us do some lactate buffering. That lactate buffering, then we go some a little bit longer tempo runs, and then you're going to see that residual buffering happen over distance. So, but we want to do them both.
Yep.
And that's kind of for me as a guy that doesn't like to do long distance running. That's a very easy compromise for me. I go, well, hey, I'm going to go to a track or go out here in my front where I have 800. I live on a dead end cul-de-sac, and it's about 800 meters. And I'll run from mailbox to mailbox and just, hey, I'm going to run at 85% from this mailbox to the third one. And then I'm going to walk for the next 3 mailboxes, turn around, and repeat that, and then the next day I might go for a 2-3 mile, just nice, easy tempo run. And then the other one I'm going to do is have my guys go, it's not even hard. I'm going to have them run at 65, 78% for 3 minutes, and then have them walk for a minute, and then have them run so that way I don't get distance in my head. But I want to keep it to where the mind is always going, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Now I can do that. And after a couple of weeks, you're going to go, well, I don't necessarily need to walk or take breaks.
Right.
And so that's what we want to create that. And also it's going to, for many of the men and women, as you know, in the military and also law enforcement fires, like they get it in their heart and they're going to go do it. And so they just go out and the first day, man, got brand new running shoes and they go hit 5 miles. And then 3 days later, like, man, I got shin splints.
Right.
So this is having those 3 runs, right? Short interval work, tempo runs, tempo being nice, easy runs. The third one doing like a run walk. Having those 3 together will allow you to accrue miles. It'll help you accrue intensity, but it also will help you manage the impact, the ground force.
Yep.
So that's kind of how my approach is a lot of times for the military groups and also for the fire. Here, let me ask you this, Stu. What advice do you give individuals? Because I know it's very much the case also in the police and fire. Like Buds guys will go, hey, Stu, are those the baits? Should I buy baits and run in them? What's your take on running in boots?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, you're going to run 100% of your time at Buds with boots. So I do recommend getting a pair of baits and running in them. But as with anything, as with rucking, as with mileage, it's a logical progression. You maybe start off with a nice short run once a week, for several weeks and build up. And I typically don't get any more than like 50% of my runs in boots, recommended because, it's not that needed. You really just need to kind of get used to it and break them in.
Yeah.
Is the big key. And if you can take a pair of broken in baits with you to Buds, that your first 6 weeks at Buds are going to be a lot more comfortable than if you're breaking in boots on day one.
Yeah, that's my advice as well. And I think that I know, especially for the firefighting population, I don't think that they run too much in boots. But so I got like what I have to do. We might get some funny looks in the gym, but I do the same thing with Buds. I say, get used to them, but the bulk of your running should be in tennis shoes. Cause we did 1 run in Buds in tennis shoes. That was, we did the 14 miler in second phase.
That's right.
But the rest, But see the thing like with the fire department, I go, well, I'm not sure. I'm quite certain that they're probably issued when they get there, but you could probably procure them. So if you do some training, like some calisthenic type training in the boots to get acclimated to the feel, but again, it's like what we keep talking about is stress inoculation. If you can experience as many things holistically as you can before going in, when you experience them, it won't be the first time. And that speaks volumes for your nervous system, for familiarity, all these expectations. And then the less new you have to deal with at the fire and police academy, the better off you're going to have. It might take you 4 or 5 weeks to adjust it to the academy. But if you can make that big adjustment in the first 2 or 3 weeks, right, and then you're really getting that routine and you can cruise.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I mean, that's exactly why I like to recommend people to go to these training programs in shape, right? In really good shape, because here's why. One, you have a reduced chances of injury because you're not going to get these overuse injuries because you've never run before. And then all of a sudden now you're running 12, 15 miles a week and you've never done that before. Right. Or another one too is it's a stress reliever. If you go there in shape, you can make the workouts that you do in police academy and fire academies a stress reliever versus a stress increaser.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start failing things and everything just kind of goes downhill. Once you start failing physically, it's not long until you mentally think maybe this isn't for me. And then everything else falls apart. So.
Yeah, because the reality is that until you get to those specialized units, and now let me be very, very clear, in no way am I saying that boot camps and academies are easy.
No.
But what I'm saying is that if you embrace that physical culture that is necessary for those, it's not that difficult.
Right.
I mean, it will be difficult.
It will be easier.
But to your point, it almost becomes cathartic and enjoyable, because I think that typically most people do physical fitness, whatever it is, whatever they choose to do, because number one, they enjoy it.
Right.
And now, for me, when I went to boot camp and stuff, like I wasn't a big calisthenics guy. I liked the weight room. I like to do pull-ups and still do, but it allowed me to go, all right, well, I'm going to push hard. And it almost was a break for me. So now running, not so much, but I think that's the same. That's again, one of those parallels that we can draw between the military and law enforcement and fire, is that prepare yourself the best you can. And then I guess on that, my last piece really is that, okay, so let's say that stereotypical guy that we're kind of talking about, man or woman, that's not the most proficient runner, but pretty aerobically or anaerobically strong, good at body weight movements. Before you go in, or it's pretty easy to program for those people, which is like, hey, we just need to work on your run because we know you're still going to do some strength training, whatever. But if you get an individual that is like kind of average on everything, then what do we do? In my opinion, if we have enough time, if like, you're in a year you're going to the police academy, because a lot of times there's a wait. Like, hey, yeah, I've qualified for it, but this year's class is full. Yep. That's a 6 months class. And then there's usually a couple months off, and then they start the next class because they get new cadre in, or they get a break as well. What you do is I go, all right, well, let's really focus on one or two things first. Let's get your running better. Okay. And then we'll focus on something. Then we'll get your push-ups better, get your aerobic strength better. If we have a condensed timeline, if we focus on everything, it tends to take a little bit more time. In the same context, if someone comes to me and goes, or student goes, hey, I want to get really big and really lean, you kind of got to go, well, you got to pick one. We're either going to bulk and then lean out, or we're going to lean out and then try and bulk without getting. So it's the same thing with aerobic and anaerobic fitness, aerobic and anaerobic strength, power, right? We've got to pick one piece for a short period of time, a couple weeks.
Right. Sure.
Hit it hard, throttle back, hit something else. Yeah. So that's what my advice to a lot of the police and law enforcement and or fire is, that typically you've got 6 months or so focus on one little piece and then go to the next.
Yeah. So getting to the training, typically, like we said, it's this fitness test, and you're going to have folks that are good at something, not good at others. And it really, you got to focus on your weakness. I've seen guys too that are great at running, have no problem with those runs, even some of the higher rep PT stuff. But once they start putting on body armor, all the firefighter gear, I mean, you're looking at 50, 60
that
pounds.
Turnout gear, serious.
You're looking at a serious weight increase on you. And so if you don't have some of those elements of fitness, that Jeff was just talking about, it can seriously, you might be able to get to the training very well because you're not going to be underweight. You're not going to be doing weight bearing exercises to get to the training, but get through the training. I guarantee you're going to be wearing your belts. You're going to be wearing your body armor. You're going to be wearing your turnout gear. All of those things require a foundation of strength. So if you have the time, you definitely want to get a strength cycle in there. Now, it doesn't mean you got to be one rep maxing anything and trying to go for a world record on a deadlift.
No.
But get some heavy weights in there so you can still also practice your runs without making those fall down. So there's a fine balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten a couple emails the last couple days from firefighters and police officers that they're almost all the same question. And it was, that's kind of for a later piece of like, when you're active duty, what's it going to look like? But a lot of times what ends up happening is, it's what Stu and I struggle with a lot of times, or at least I do, is that we are trying to give you the perspective of what you should be doing before without clouding it with what a current successful police officer and firefighter are doing to stay in shape.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily translate into, and vice versa.
Yes.
So,
same with buds.
Exactly.
Same with,
And so what we're trying to say is like, hey, well, for those of you that want to be police officers, firefighters, you very likely either it's family is doing it or it's something you've always wanted to do. And you've been able to engage with these firefighters and police officers and go, what should I do? What should I do? They may have given you really good advice, but a lot of times too is what becomes kind of difficult for us is like, how do we give you advice without saying, hey, this is how I should train or how I do train? We're trying to give you guys a perspective of really, you need to focus on the physical side. And if you have a weakness, you need to attack it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, how about this one? For firefighters, their specific test usually starts off with the standard push-up, sit-up, 1.5 miles to get to the door, right? But once you get, all right, you're good enough to, maybe go to the academy. Now we're going to take you and we're going to give you the CPAT.
Yeah.
Right? The CPAT, candidate, oh man, I can't believe I can't remember what it stands for. Candidate Fitness Assessment Test or something like that. Yeah. Physical assessment test. Yeah. So anyway, this is probably, and I love this test. The firefighters have gotten this right for decades. And I think the military is actually coming around to realizing.
The Army is implementing a very similar thing. Yes.
Yep. The military is coming around to say, you know what, we need to do some more job-related skill work.
Yep.
To test our applicants, and that's what the CPAT is. You have. You got hammer swings, you have carrying stuff upstairs in all your gear. You're even on air.
Yeah. There's a dummy drag. You're crawling.
There's no running in it because you're never going to run on the fire grounds. So you're just walking fast and moving with a purpose. Yep. And a ladder. That one gets a lot of people. So your ability to, pick a ladder off the ground and put it up against the wall is really challenging to a lot of people, especially if you're kind of short and a little bit light.
Yep.
It's one of the big failures. So, getting into the weight room, practicing some, hang cleans, deadlift, hang clean, push press, those type of basic power lifts, but you don't have to be heavy. You just have to be somewhat heavy. And those 10 exercises can help. We're going to put a lot of links into here. We'll put links to Jeff's YouTube channel because he has some great running programs in there. I'll throw a couple article links in there too of some of the things that we're talking about too, so you can kind of refer to them in the description. But yeah, the firefighter, I love it. I mean, that is
Yeah.
about as close to a job performance test that candidates are allowed to take. Usually when we take it, you're already gone through training, and now it's kind of like just a job assessment type of thing.
Because what they've done before anyone else, and those rules are written in blood.
Yes.
And those were a genesis of so many firefighters in the point of greatest stress, having to accomplish these tasks that were assumed that could be accomplished, and there was failure that affected someone's life.
Yep.
And the firefighter being, it's crazy because the world is set up to where, like, I remember hearing the statistic that the last time there was a death in a school in an actual, like, a blaze, a fire, like stereotypical fire in a school was like, it's been like 20 years or something, because now fire codes and flame retardant materials and that sort of things. So when these firefighters encounter, no kidding, fires, it's bananas. It's not like, I mean, guys dropping a turkey and stuff into their boiling oil and stuff. Yes, but I'm talking like when they have to encounter a fire, a building on fire, it's serious. It's like, I mean, I can't even articulate the seriousness of that. So, and same with police officers. Like, every time that they show up, they are dealt the most difficult hand, in my opinion, because
absolutely.
For me, our rules of engagement were very clear.
Yeah.
We and for those individuals, God bless them, because that's why I didn't go into law enforcement, because my ability to show restraint would be very difficult. But me getting back on target is that we need to make sure that, and here's the difficult side too, is that you don't always have to, you don't always have to use force and always have to be physically fit, but when you need it,
yes,
we can't be in a position of failure. And that's where the difference of, like, hey, how do we train to get there? And that's where that separation goes. Well, now I'm here. How do I train to stay here?
Yeah. With tactical fitness, exactly. I mean, it is, it's that important, because your fitness level can one day be a determining factor in whether or not you live or die.
Yep. Or
right?
Somebody else.
Or
yep.
somebody else, or somebody you're trying to save, or you can't get to them, or you can't lift them. There are things like that, and in the police and fire department especially, it can happen at any time. I mean, like when military goes on deployment, they're kind of like, okay, I know things are going to happen.
Yep, you're
right?
on.
But you're on. But for police and firefighters, it's any Tuesday. And they can see these events happen, and all matters of 24/7. Thank God for them, because it's. I think they're underappreciated in some circles. They're definitely not in my family.
Right.
We love them. In fact, I even spoke at a recent firefighter graduation, and I was honored to do it, because I remember a off-duty firefighter saved my life when I was about 2 years old.
Yep.
I was just told,
I think I'm speaking for that next graduation class.
Yes. Yeah.
I believe I am.
They're a really neat group. I've done a couple workouts with them, and they love to have, different types of people come in there and speak to them, and, relate, their jobs to, what they do, and appreciative of what they do. So, anyway, I've always been appreciative of police and fire department. And I just, like I said, just thank God for you. But, like I said, this is tactical fitness. And with tactical fitness, I think the things that have changed probably in the last decade and a half, thank goodness, is people in the military, law enforcement, and firefighter are starting to truly consider themselves athletes.
Yep.
Where before it wasn't a requirement, or I shouldn't say it wasn't quite as knowledgeable a subject, to be able to treat yourself like an athlete and do these jobs. So
because I think technology has allowed us to advance in our techniques and make them more streamlined, safer, all those sort of things. So I think there was this component, and we're starting to see the backlash of it, is that So military, fire, and police, one of the foundations of that entire organization has always been physical readiness and physical fitness.
Yes.
And, for a myriad of reasons, there has been kind of some diluting of that, for whatever reason. And they're different from department to department, region to region, reason for reason. But what we're doing is we're seeing a degradation of that culture. And what I hate to see is that there isn't a mechanism in place to improve that culture again, because the demand is it never went away.
True.
And I think that that's the big thing. And so we want to make sure that because here's why. All of these physical problems, aside from like falling off a ladder or getting shot or whatever it is, those things that you can't control, we can prepare for all this, especially the academies and boot camps and such. We have to be okay with to say, I'm not okay for you to show up here disrespecting this culture and not showing up in shape. We have to be okay with that now. And we can do that because training, this might be the only time in your lives, realistically, that you have a date to train for and very measurable analytics to go, well, here's the standard. Because hopefully you all realize that there is no off season for you guys.
Yeah. There
isn't. And we have to train for these moments so we can get our foot in the door. And then that's what we'll talk about next time. How do you train for something when there's no off season?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I actually have a good presentation I give to this, New York City firefighters actually about how to create your own off season. Yep. And it's so difficult. I mean, it is a fine balance, whether it's, periodization throughout the different seasons of the year. What's the busiest season that you need to be ready for? Is it winter for firefighters in the city, or is it summer for firefighters in the out west? There's all different seasons, so to speak, but it's still a 24/7 job. But there are definitely busy times in there. And I think that's a really good idea. We can talk a little bit more about that on the active duty side.
Yeah, keep this in mind when you go to boot camps and you go to the academies. It's going to be the only time in your tactical life, probably. There are some kind of exceptions depending where you're at in rank and stuff, but you're not going to get it again until you're very senior. But it's the only time in your life you're going to be like, well, this is what time I get up. This is what time I eat breakfast. This is what time I'm in a parochial setting. And it's sandwiched in between two meals. And then we have a scheduled PT, and then we have and then you have another meal, and then you have study time. Like, you're basically a college athlete at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're never going to have that again, probably, for a predictable amount of time.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying is, like, we can prepare ourselves for those academies and boot camps because we know where the left and right flanks are.
Right.
You won't have that once you get through.
Yeah. Once you get through, it becomes a little more delicate, and we will get into that the next time.
For sure.
Like I said, this is Stu Smith and Jeff Nichols. Check out the links in below. We'll have those there for you. If you got questions, please email us. Comment on the videos. They're on his YouTube page as well as this one. So, you got anything to close with, Jeff?
No, I think that's. I think what we're probably going to end up doing is, it's very easy for us to kind of talk about the military space. And this is where we really want to encourage the firefighters and the police officers, even the federal, any of that genre of profession. Please send us, put comments to help drive us to the information that you're hoping to find.
Right.
Like, that's kind of, we get so many questions from the military space. I get about a handful or so a week on the fire and law enforcement. But again, you guys are driving the content, so drive us to where you want us to go.
Yep. All right. So next one, we'll talk about active duty police and fire, and talk about sleep when your schedules are disrupted. We'll talk about recovery, stress mitigation, programming, periodization. So I'm looking forward to that one, Jeff, and
we'll do it again soon.
Check it out.
All right, take care.
All right, we'll see you.